What's up, everybody? February 2nd edition of the Fightful MMA podcast. I'm your host, Showdown Joe Ferraro. You can catch me online at any social media platform that you like, at Showdown Joe. And it is Thursday, and I'm joined, as always, managing editor for Fightful MMA, Fightful.com, Fightful Wrestling, Fightful Boxing, Fightful Kempo Karate, Fightful Sancho, Fightful Death Touch, whatever you want to call it. Sean Ross Sapp, you can follow him via social media as well, at Sean Ross Sapp. Sean, you look like you're sick, man. Are you okay?
Sweat hogs in San Antonio gave me the flu.
Are you going to be able to survive? Should I just let you go now and let me carry this for the next 43 minutes? Or
I'm good. I've got you right now. I've got Matt Riddle at 4, and after that, I'll be pretty much sticking to editing throughout this weekend, I think.
Oh, boy. Gotcha. Well, lots to discuss in the world of mixed martial arts. And, of course, despite the fact that you are under the weather, I want to thank you, the viewers especially want to thank you for coming on here, because I know how difficult it can be when you catch the flu, when you're on the road. Been there, done that. And when you travel, sometimes even that recycled air in the plane gets the best of you. Hence, the Diaz brothers will always talk about getting off a plane right away and getting some cardio in and sweating that crap out of your system. And that's another discussion for another day. Saturday, you were a busy man. I'm sure by now you've caught up with UFC on Fox, Shevchenko versus Pena. Lots of things to discuss. One of the things that we have in the hockey world are your 3 stars after a game. My 3 stars, obviously, were the last 3 bouts in Francis Ngannou, Jorge Masvidal, and Valentina Shevchenko. Special mention goes to Jason Knight. Any 3 stars for you or honorable mentions?
It was nice to see a Sun Tzu bounce back after, like I've mentioned before, he had that ankle injury that sidelined him forever. Not the best fight in the world, but it was good to see him get a win. Sam Alvey keeps rolling. That's positive news for him. But yeah, I got to say Ngannou, because if you put him in a title fight next week, I wouldn't bat an eye. If you put him against a top 5 opponent, I wouldn't bat an eye. Masvidal, I think there's a lot more to talk about in that fight than what we have right now. And Shevchenko, of course, beat Juliana Pena. She shut up Juliana Pena, who has done a lot of talking, and I guess we're doing Shevchenko Nunes too. I think. Apparently.
I don't see why not.
Well, they fought 9-10 months ago.
Under a different auspices, obviously, a different sort of realm. Sure. in the division. Times have changed. In less than a year, one becomes the champion, one becomes technically the number 1 contender. I have no issues with it, despite the short time frame.
Well, I'll tell you what, the saving grace might be, it's going to be a 5-round fight. Amanda Nunes in a 5-round fight versus Amanda Nunes in a 3-round fight is a completely different fight. And Shevchenko went the full 3 rounds with Amanda Nunes. So what I remember from that fight, and I don't remember a lot, it was like 29-28, 29-27, 29-27. It could very well end up being Shevchenko taking rounds 4 and 5 and either, maybe taking the fight if that's the case. So, hey, you know what? The more that I think about it, the more okay I am with it, just as long as Amanda Nunes isn't trying to compete for a featherweight title that shouldn't exist anyway.
Yeah, you know what? That's another topic altogether. That's or 2 topics altogether. But we'll get to that potentially later on. Jorge Masvidal. It's not something that surprised a lot of people that really analyzed this bout versus Cowboy Cerrone, especially Reed Kuhn, who was on the Fightful MMA podcast on Friday and was, I wouldn't say adamant, Sean, but was like, guys, Cerrone's been fighting way too much. He just fought in December. He did get knocked down by Matt Brown in December in Toronto, and now he's fighting Masvidal. That's kind of dangerous, and it's not looking good for him. Lo and behold, he gets knocked down at the end of the first round. Boom, and now he's second round. He shouldn't even been competing, to be honest with you. I don't know how he got past the doctor, but he's able to compete, and Masvidal finishes him off.
A lot of people act like Cerrone's fighting like 6 times a year. It's 4 times a year, but that's a lot in the UFC. It's usually about 3 times. But the thing is, it isn't 4 fights 1 year, 1 time. No, it's every year since I think 2013. He's had at least 4 fights. My main concern wasn't how much he fights. It's the last 2 fights where he's been fighting off of his back foot. When did that become a thing? I know it became a thing between 202 and 206, apparently, because that's when he had trouble with Matt Brown and he had a whole lot of trouble with Masvidal. Now, the thing is, Masvidal and Brown are both aggressive aggressive strikers. And, maybe you would want to fight off of your back foot against those two guys. But apparently it doesn't work as well as whatever you were doing before. Now, that kick that Masvidal caught, it was not your standard Donald Cerrone kick. He usually keeps people at the end of his kicks. He didn't do that with Masvidal. Like, you'll see he caught him with the upper part of his shin, and Masvidal knew it, and he's like, okay, I'm going to counter it. Pop, dropped him. So there are a lot of little things that are worrisome about Donald Cerrone. Even though he beat Matt Brown, that was a tough fight for him. That was a very tough fight for him, especially as compared to some of the fights that he's just made look simple at welterweight. Now, the guy he's fighting, formerly a lightweight as well, but I'm also glad to see two guys fighting at welterweight where they should be fighting. Don't cut that extra weight. Don't do all that extra damage to your body. But yeah, I think that's even a more interesting story is why Donald Cerrone has fought off his back foot. Maybe it's the style of opponent.
Yeah, that's a good analysis right there. Sorry, I got Lex McMahon calling me. Should I pick it up?
Sure. Do it.
It just ended.
Oh, come on.
What does Lex want? That should be something, who knows, Titan FC related, could be UFC related because he does represent Stefan Struve, but amongst other guys. And we do have another guy that just literally just fought in Titan. First time, got to call his fight, and the UFC scoops him up, just like they scooped up Volkan Oezdemir competing on Saturday, which we'll get to a little bit later. Sean, you and I, before we move on to, Francis Ngannou, who towers over me, and we've seen that picture on social media, Masvidal has some options, with some options falling through. There's a weird sort of triangle happening here. Nick Diaz was involved. Nick Diaz was supposed to take on Robbie Lawler. The whole Damian Maia thing. Damian Maia turns down the fight with Masvidal. They're going to go Diaz. It's just a big, huge kerfuffle at the moment. And it looks like Neil Magny will be the guy that'll be taking on Jorge Masvidal next. I'm not sure I like this fight, to be honest with you. I would rather see Masvidal take on the likes of Damian Maia. But listen, if you're Damian Maia, you're at his age, you want to protect that title shot. Masvidal and Lawler would be a great fight, but they're teammates, or they train at the same gym. Don't think that's going to happen. I mean, what is your take on all of this?
I wouldn't mind Masvidal Condit. That would be interesting if they could swing that somehow, but I don't know if Nick Diaz is such a conundrum. He claims he wants to fight, but he only wants to pick his fight for his time, for his money, for his title. It's so weird. I don't know. I don't know if he even fights again. It's a weird situation. Don't know if he'll even want to cut the weight to 170, much less actually fight somebody that's a threat. Because if you look back at Nick Diaz in Strikeforce, those opponents were tailor-made for him. They weren't wrestlers. He didn't fight a wrestler for like 10 years, it seemed like. The Neil Magny fight, it depends on what Neil Magny we get. We could get a very boring Neil Magny, or we could get a very exciting Neil Magny. And I think a very exciting Neil Magny could be big trouble for Masvidal too, because of that reach. That 80-inch reach is insane. If I were them, I would try to put Masvidal versus Condit. If you can swing that, it might be a little harder than I think. But yeah, I mean, Masvidal's a top 5 guy now.
And imagine that fight does take place and Condit smashes him, or finishes him, or wins that fight.
Then you got a guy who wasn't in the title picture before last week, not in the title picture anymore.
Right? It's just, that's the beauty of mixed martial arts. This type of story, this type of angle, this type of situation is what really puts a smile on my face. But it is what it is. It looks like it's going to be Neil Magny, to my understanding, but we'll see what happens.
Let me interrupt you real quick. What about your boy, Kamaru Usman, debuting in the UFC Top 15 this week? Number 14.
My boy. It's about time.
Hey, well, I mean, Lorenz Larkin, he's 14, so I don't think that Lorenz Larkin not re-signing put him in there. Maybe it did. Yeah, I think the fact that Rick Story and Lorenz Larkin were pulled kind of pushed him into that 14 spot. And I want to know what you think about this weird situation where Lorenz Larkin, Rick Story, and Misha Serkinov are removed from the rankings and all turned down contracts.
I don't have any inside information just yet regarding Misha, but to my understanding, there is a lot based on some of the management that I've spoken to in the past couple of weeks. This whole Viacom thing, this whole Bellator thing, is continuing to slowly sort of almost not stir the pot, but it's kind of brewing. Right, it's getting higher and higher and higher, and and I know a lot of the bigger guys in the bigger divisions are looking at Ryzen as an option. There's a lot of conversations from people from Ryzen flying over to North America, or at least getting on some video chats and talking to some guys and some managers. There are some changes happening in the mixed martial arts world, and I'm not saying the UFC is going to be digressing anytime soon or losing any sort of its market share, but there are going to be a lot of options for a lot of fighters. I'm not saying Misha was upset that he couldn't get that Shogun fight. He really wanted that Shogun fight because obviously with that cachet and the stock value it would have brought to his name should he emerge victorious. But yeah, there's some things that are changing in the whole MMA promotion, fighters having options realm as well.
Yeah, and I think the UFC should really not make a habit of letting some of their guys go right before they hit their prime off of winning streaks, like Serkinov, like Lorenz Larkin, who may or may not be in his prime. Even a decent name like Rick Story, maybe don't make a habit of that, because it's a fantastic way to develop a new strike force and have some real competition facing you, especially when they are backed by Viacom. I would not allow that to happen. I would not allow that to happen, because there was a guy once upon a time, Joe, named Ted Turner. And one day he just decided, well, you know what? I've owned this little podunk wrestling company for a while. I want to compete with the WWE. He called the president in. He said, what do I need to do to compete with WWE? And the next thing you know, there is a primetime Monday night wrestling program opposite of Monday Night Raw, and they kicked the living crap out of WWE for several years. Viacom is absolutely capable of making that happen at the drop of a hat. They could decide tomorrow, you know what, we want to funnel a lot of resources into Bellator MMA. We want to really put a lot into this, and we could have some real competition. So I wouldn't play that game of footsie with Viacom and Bellator if I were WME, IMG, JK, ROTF, LMAO, as you call them.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely bang on. And I think, okay, let me say this one more time. Full disclosure, obviously I'm biased, okay? And I do play-by-play for Ryzen. But we have to remember what happened with Pride, okay, or how Pride became so popular and so big, because people will always look for a second option when it comes to fighting. That's how our mind generally works. And Pride became a massive organization. It was much larger than the UFC at the time, before the UFC became who they were, courtesy of television here. But Pride became big through a VHS era, okay, through a videotape era. There was no social media, okay? Ryzen has the ability now to become absolutely huge because of social media. When I say huge, I mean getting huge very, very quickly based on the product that they have. Now, unfortunately, in comparison to the UFC, they only hold 4 to 5 shows a year. The UFC has like 40 or 50 a year. Okay, so a bit of a different story, but they have the opportunity to be special, to put on special shows and pay the fighters a lot of money, because they're getting from 25, 30 to potentially 90,000 people in the Saitama Super Arena. So there's an option there. And you got Viacom, tons, like you said, tons of coin. And if they woke up and decided, hey, you know what? We'll go after the UFC. We'll go after WEMI, MI, JFK, airport and stuff like that. They'll do whatever they want, whenever they want. So it'll be interesting to see what 2017, and of course, when you talk about these 3 fighters and other fighters potentially, like who would have ever thought Rory McDonald was going to leave, other than the fact that I know who Rory's manager is and who told me a long time ago, hey, you know what? Bellator's an option for every fighter. I said, no, come on. And he broke it down for me when he represented Gilbert Melendez. And Melendez was on his last fight, puts on that exceptional scrap versus Diego Sanchez, where the media, Sean, the media that were cage side forgot their laptops, stood up and clapped for those 2 guys. Little did we really realize that was Melendez's last fight, and he had to put on a performance because his management was also negotiating with Bellator, had a deal. The deal was done. He was going to Bellator until Lorenzo stepped up and said, you know what, we'll do this, that, this, and that. And next thing you know, Melendez is a coach on The Ultimate Fighter.
Do you think Lorenzo leaving is one of the reasons this is happening? Because this has happened a lot more since maybe the spring of 2016, when he probably knew he was out the door.
Yeah, 100%. There's a different mentality when you were Zuffa, who bought it from SEG, and their passion was so diverse in terms of getting it regulated and sanctioned in every single state in the United States, getting it done across Canada, going international, building the sport internationally, doing so many things, getting this whole economic impact study when they're doing all this stuff, getting lobbyist groups, getting this. And I said it so many times, the minute they get New York, mark my words, they're going to sell this company. And I remember when Dana used to do the scrums, and he would hint at that, and I would get these fat media members who never trained a day of mixed martial arts in their life, who don't know shit about mixed martial art and don't know damn anything about the promotion, the business side of the game, are cutting him off, asking what type of gum George St. Pierre chews, or what type of socks does Anderson Silva wear? Dude, Dana White just said he's leaving the sport soon. They said they're leaving. Follow up with that question. I just would walk away, and I would wait till Dave Charlotte would give me Dana White myself, and then I would ask that stuff, and we would do it on UFC Central. This was something that was happening a long time ago, Sean, and it continues to happen. There's going to be some big changes. I don't know what WEMI, IMG, and stuff like that are planning. What I do know is based on what Reed Kuhn said on Friday, that the broadcasting rights are up. The broadcasting rights are way more expensive right now. There may be a change going from Fox to ESPN. There may be a spreading of the wealth. I'd like to know what that means in Canada, because right now it's with TSN and the Fight Network. If there's going to be spreading of the wealth, will it go back to Sportsnet, or will part of it go back to Sportsnet? There's a lot of changes coming down the pipe. And you're a guy who said it on numerous occasions that there's going to be some changes globally. There's going to be some changes to how many shows are being done. I'm from an old school. I want to see one pay-per-view, 2 weeks later, a show on Fox and or Fox Sports 1 that promotes the next pay-per-view. I'm cool with a UFC event every 2 weeks. That's what I'd like to see.
Yeah, unfortunately, they're not going to do it that way, but I wish they're going to. I think they will drastically reduce the number of cards and the number of fights on those cards. I think we're heading towards a period where the fighters are a little more elite. And, Sean Pearson, he wasn't happy about CM Punk being in the UFC. That was interesting. Go back and watch that, you guys. But yeah, I think we're heading back towards that. But here's the thing. Is it the elite of the elite when you're not offering 3 top 15 guys enough to stay? When you're not offering Rory McDonald enough to stay? When you're not offering Ben Henderson enough to stay? When you're just letting these guys walk away like that? I don't get it. I don't understand it. And I think if Lorenzo didn't agree to negotiate the deal, Chris Weidman would be in Bellator too.
You're right. I think you're bang on. I think you're 100% right. I think part of it is the mentality, and I don't know, and I can't speak on behalf of Ari Emanuel and his camp and his team that filters down that are overseeing the UFC. But I think there's going to be a situation where they're looking more, and Pearson talked about it yesterday, how we've gone from sport in 1993 to building up to being banned to where it is now, which is sports entertainment, that perhaps the new ownership of the UFC is looking more at characters, looking more at guys and girls that'll promote themselves, not just with the UFC's backing, but via social media and becoming a star of that nature. Whereas the other ones, like the Rory McDonalds, who've got tons of skill, but they're quiet. They're not that type of person that's going to sit there and promote themselves over and over again. As far as they're concerned, whatever, I just show up and fight. And that's an old school mentality. The new school is, it's more than just fighting. Sean Pearson said it best. It's a full-time job. Yeah, you got to train. Yeah, you got to prepare for your fights, but you got to do it. Look at Jorge Masvidal. He talks all about, I don't give a shit about social media. I know the formula, what it takes to be on Instagram and become popular, blah, blah. I don't care about the fake media, blah, 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 blah. But here he is doing all these interviews now and getting out there, and everyone's talking about him.
Yeah. You got to do it. You got to get people talking about you. That's the important thing in this game these days, is to get people to talk about you. It's as simple as that. You get people to talk about you, you get more interest on you, and things change for you. That's really it.
Jim Ross, God, I keep telling the story all the time, Sean. Jim Ross, Chael Sonnen, and I, when we were talking to the various fighters at that incredible Battlegrounds show, that one-night tournament, welterweight tournament, and we were talking to the fighters, and Jim Ross would look over at me and ask me some of the technical MMA stuff about the fighters and what I know about each guy. But the speech he kept giving them was the same thing. And Chael was just smiling ear to ear. I'm not doing that accent, but Jim Ross is basically saying you need to make some noise. You need to make some noise. If you're not making noise, no one's going to care. And he would use
make some noise, kid.
Yeah. He would use the Steve Austin example, the Rock example, and all kinds, Undertaker, just Brock Lesnar. He would use the examples over and over again about making some noise, and he would end off every one of those diatribes with every fighter saying, so it puts cheese on your Whopper, son. And I was like, this guy's just the greatest ever. Like Jim Ross. But it's true.
He's great.
Yeah, he's just fantastic, man. But, okay. You mentioned CM Punk. Obviously, Pearson's not a happy camper with CM Punk coming back, potentially coming back. You're a wrestling guy. You live and breathe that type of sports event entertainment. It's crossing over with this sports entertainment. CM Punk coming back, I don't know, man. I haven't thought too much about it just yet because I think everyone deserves a second chance. But after what we saw in that first one, you didn't defend that takedown. You didn't know that you can't just go into Mickey Gall like that. But what's your thoughts?
Third from the top on a Fight Pass card, or I don't want to see it. That's how I feel. Put him against somebody else that's inexperienced because it's. I mean, I'll pull up the ranking, or not the rankings, but the roster real quick. But the idea that they gave him anything but a tough fight is ridiculous because they did. They gave him a guy who'd been training for like 8 years and had this was his fifth fight between amateur and pro. That's a lot. That's a lot to deal with. But I mean, they had some Chinese fighters that were like 1-3.
Yeah,
put them up against one of those. Why not? If you're gonna do it to push your Fight Pass subscriptions up. And I don't know. I mean, he moves the needle, but you know what? O.J. Simpson would move the needle too. But are we doing that? No. We're not having him fight. It's weird. It's just weird. I get it. Like he's a name. He's WWE guy. But I mean, you signed him. You didn't sign Bobby Lashley. That Bobby Lashley's a WWE TNA guy who is like 15-2.
Yeah,
15-2. And would he get crushed by 90% of UFC heavyweights? Yeah, probably. But there's a few heavyweights he would have beaten, and you could have made a big deal out of that too. Not as big of a deal as Punk because he was never as big of a star as CM Punk. But hey, they could have signed Batista a while back. They didn't do that, so hats off to them. Which I think they probably were interested, but I think Batista was not interested. He was talking to Strikeforce for a little while, but that fell through. I don't know exactly how that went, but.
Yeah, he was also training with the Diaz brothers at the time with Cesar Gracie. So
yes.
There's that Strikeforce connection back then. Now, speaking of heavyweights, Francis Ngannou. This guy just scares the hell out of me. But he's
disgusting. He's disgusting.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing. And he just waits. He has that right hand. He just puts that left hand out there and he just waits and waits. And then once he unloads it, it is lights out. Now, I'm not saying he deserves a title shot versus Stipe Miocic, but man, I know it's the heavyweight division, and he's probably one fight away. But the fact he did this to Arlovsky that quickly as well, we could say what we want about Arlovsky, but Ngannou continues to improve and impress, and I cannot wait to see his next fight.
Oh, me too. And I don't want to see Arlovsky get cut. I want to see Arlovsky fight somebody outside of the top 15. Give the guy a damn break, please. You savages in the UFC, cut this guy a damn break for once. But
Roy Nelson?
Francis, yeah, I guess technically Roy Nelson is outside of the top 15 now, isn't he?
I like that fight.
So yeah, hell, I like that fight too. Make that a co-main event of an FS1 card. I'm good to go. Roy Nelson will make that the most boring fight of all time, though, because that's Roy Nelson.
Come on, are you serious?
Yeah. Roy Nelson isn't exciting anymore. But Francis Ngannou, man, whoo, like I said earlier on the show, they put him against Stipe Miocic. I'm not arguing with it. I wouldn't be mad at it.
I would. Only because I firmly believe that a guy like Ngannou has to be tested. He has to go
Yeah.
more than one round. He has to have his heart tested. He has to be in a situation where it's like, holy smokes, I punched this guy with everything I had and he's not going away. Now what do I do?
Well, the thing with that fight, the Miocic fight, like, okay, it looks like Dos Santos Miocic maybe. Miocic already beat Overeem. He beat Verdum. Cain Velasquez will not get a title fight until he proves he can stay healthy. He won't. That's just the fact of the matter. Ben Rothwell, he's coming off a suspension, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong. I feel like he was suspended. No, it was a couple years ago he was suspended. But he's coming off of a loss to Junior Dos Santos. He ain't getting it. If something happens to Junior Dos Santos, I could see them calling up Francis Ngannou and saying, hey, buddy, how about this? And here's the thing. He might win.
No, 100%. Yeah. I mean, he's got that power. He can end things very, very quickly. I mean,
as we saw,
it is scary. I mean, Sean, I cannot stress it enough. If you ever get the opportunity to stand in front of this man, ask him to put his left hand out and just take a look at his right hand. Okay.
I'm all good on that. Because I like not shitting my pants. Thanks.
It is fantastic. But he's just, like I said, he's the nicest guy you can possibly ever meet, but there's a bright future for this guy. Okay, let's move away from the Shevchenko-Pena card. Anything you want to talk about there?
It looks like we got a couple of contenders out of that. That's cool. Also, Jason Knight, Alex Caceres, it was a good fight as I expected.
Jason Knight is mean. All right. He's not a nice human being. When he gets your back and he punches you, he's not thinking about quantity. He's thinking of busting your face, like bones and everything.
So weird how similar those two, like the parallels between those two and their careers. So I hope that Alex Caceres can bounce back. I love watching that guy fight. I love watching him fight, and I love watching Jason Knight fight now as well. Also in that Shevchenko-Pena card, as I mentioned, a Sun Sao Alvi get wins. Good for them. Yeah. Sure. Eric Spicely, pro wrestling fan, got a win too.
Yeah, of course. I knew you were going to go there. In the aftermath, there's a lot of conversation. I wrote an article for FightfulMMA.com regarding Amanda Nunes, regarding Shevchenko, Ronda Rousey, and all that. Now, before I get into the sort of the promotion, actually, no, I do want to ask you a question before we get to the conversation of Dana White stating that Ronda Rousey is probably done. Amanda Nunes, obviously an openly gay champion. I would like to see her some way, somehow partner up or affiliate herself or be some sort of ambassador with the LGBT community. I think that'd be absolutely fantastic. What do you think?
I do too. I think that would go a long way in attracting some new fans and building some goodwill. I think that'd be great. Also, a lot of respect to her for apologizing for kind of how she acted after the Rousey fight, because she didn't have to do that. She didn't have to apologize, but she did. So a lot of respect to her for that.
Absolutely. Shevchenko, the one way, I mean, if I'm thinking as a promoter, the nationalism, patriotism, just promoting her culture, promoting where she came from would be one fantastic way to garner new fans and really promote the fact of where she was born. I know she's in Peru now, I believe, but I think she's from Kazakhstan originally she was born, but either way, promote
Shevchenko?
That.
Yeah. She was born in the Soviet Union, but I think she's from I think she's Peruvian.
Okay. Either way, how sweet would it be if she was to get a Peruvian necktie in a fight? But at the same time, promote that because I think she's fantastic. But I need to ask you a very serious question. It could lead to some deep thought. I hope you're not offended by it, but it's a very important question that we need to know and we need to ask in the world of mixed martial arts. Shevchenko's dance after that, in comparison to Ben Rothwell's epic dance, we need to know which one's better.
Well, it depends. Are we talking Rothwell's dance before he knocked out Brandon Vera when he hit his TRT switch and just flicked it into hyper mode after they had this boring fight? Then he just started to do the Clay Guida and beat the crap out of him, because that one beats everything. When you are a woman like Valentina Shevchenko, who people don't realize started fighting at 12, and when she was 12, she knocked out a 22-year-old woman, you can do whatever the hell you want. Who's going to stop you? I mean, People don't realize she's been fighting MMA since 2003. She's like 28 years old. What?
Yeah.
What? How does that happen in a world? She took 4 years off, 4.5 years off because she was like 20. Man, that woman, she's something special. I was a little put off initially by the Nunes-Shevchenko rematch immediately, but since talking to you here and then, just a reminder, 5-round fight, 3-round fight, big difference there. I'm all for it now. I was initially I was a little reticent, but I think that's the right fight to make.
I think the right thing to do is to figure out some way, somehow, of how to get some matching gifts of Shevchenko's dance, Ben Rothwell's dance, and getting Fightful MMA. And let's get it out there, and let's put it out on social media, get a vote going, because that is absolutely beyond epic between those two. And I know Shevchenko's was more of a traditional dance, which is badass, but
she posts videos of her dancing all the time.
All right, I'll have to get out there. I get some slacking on that. I will write that down right now.
You do that. We post them on the site sometimes.
What are you saying now?
I just said we post them on the site sometimes.
Okay, I will do
Slow
that.
Saturdays, we got to have some content.
Absolutely. Now, moving forward in that same division, Ronda Rousey, Dana White says she is done. I respectfully disagree. I think she wants to just have at least one more run. If she can get rid of where she's at right now and move on to a different camp, give her someone that's more of a fair fight. Get rid of the hype around Ronda Rousey, and match her up fairly against someone in the division where she has a chance of actually, coming out and winning. I know it sounds silly, but then you have obviously Elias Theodorou just vehemently saying, "No, dude, she's done." And you got Pearson saying, "No, she can probably come back." What do you say?
I think she's going to fight again, and I think she can fight again. And I think, like I said, anybody out of the top 10 and I know Dana White's like, there are no tune-up fights in the UFC. Well, that's why your fucking stars don't last that long either. That is an okay thing to do. Tune-up fights are an okay thing to do. Fighting 4 times, we wouldn't be looking at Donald Cerrone and saying, oh my God, they fought 4 times a year if tune-up fights were more of a thing. And hey, you know what? You can build stars off of tune-up fights too, because what if somebody comes in and knocks off Ronda Rousey out of the top 15? Well, I don't care how many times in a row Ronda Rousey's lost. People know who she is. People know who that person is now. Give her Leslie Smith. Sure. Why not? I think she can and will fight again. Don't know if it'll be anytime soon, but Gina Carano was thinking about fighting the year before. So, yeah, I think she'll fight again.
Speaking of a guy who may not be fighting, though, I don't claim to be Captain Political. I don't really follow politics as much as potentially I should, seeing as I'm the host of a daily podcast. I barely know Canadian politics, where I'm from, let alone American politics, although our TV stations here, we get tons of American feeds here, whether it's CNN, Fox, and the Jazz. But after Donald Trump did sign his executive order on Saturday, banning, I guess, flights or people from 7 different countries, Muslim countries, from coming in, we have ourselves one fighter that's fighting in Brooklyn, and Gegard Mousasi, who is born in Iran but has a Dutch passport, who's concerned, potentially not, maybe nothing to worry about, but there's a concern he may not be able to get into the country. I mean, I don't know your thoughts on all of this, and just what you make of all this. I don't know. I mean, I'm not a pro or anti-Trump supporter. I just keep my hands away from it as long as it doesn't affect me getting down to the States and doing what I love to do and then coming home. I'm cool. But what's your take on all this right now?
My take is that Dana White is a friend of Donald Trump's, and Donald Trump doesn't seem to care about any rules, regulations, or standards. So one call from Dana White will probably fix the situation. And that's about as political as I'll get.
Fair enough. We move on. I want to get your thoughts on what potentially might happen to the television deal in 2018 for the UFC when you think about right now where they're at, how much they're going to be charging, because Reed Kuhn on last Friday's podcast dropped some bombs and dropped some nuggets of information that had me thinking, oh, wow. And then afterwards, I'm like, oh, wait a second. What about Canada, where I'm from? Because that television deal, kind of changed my career, kind of changed my life when it moved from where I was at to where it is right now. But what are your thoughts down there south of the border?
I'm interested. Fox feels like home to them. Like they always have a place somewhere on Fox. I mean, they've been on a billion different channels from Ion to YouTube, Facebook, like FX. They've been on so many channels. Spike. It's been hard to kind of keep track of all the places they've been. If ESPN gets them, that would be interesting, but I wonder if that would skew ESPN's coverage of them. Because the thing that I've liked about WME IMG is that they want a more objective approach. They don't want the shilling approach as much, and I really like that. Like we've seen Daniel Cormier get a hand in this, but Fox and the UFC have made some puzzling choices together for who they do and they don't allow in the booth. Like if you're off of a suspension, you're not going to be working for them. So no Frank Mir, no Stephan Bonner, and they were both very, very good at their jobs. And last week they had Michelle Watterson. And she wasn't good. And it was her first time, and they're trying to push her. But, I mean, ultimately, she's a 31-year-old strawweight that isn't going to – I can't imagine that her run's going to be that much longer. And no disrespect to her. Maybe it will be. Maybe she'll be one of those anomalies. And it was her first time, but they made some puzzling decisions there. There's a lot more that goes into this because, Joe, as you know, like you said, it affected your career, your life. This will affect the career and lives of all the people that are analysts now, that work there now. Like, it's a long-reaching decision, and it should affect the fighters because the fighters should see a cut of that damn money.
I concur. I totally agree. So I know exactly what you're saying. I know exactly how things change. I've been told, even up until recently, things are fluid. Things will always change, but I call BS on a lot of stuff that's been told to me recently over the past 2 years, I should actually say. Let's move forward. UFC, Houston, the return of the Korean zombie. We will talk about ring rust, cage rust, if it's real, whether it's not real. But before we get to that main event, kicking off the preliminary card, we'll kind of go through this card fairly quickly, but kicking off the preliminary card is a rematch between Tecia Torres and Bec Rawlings. This has got some interesting sort of angles to it. I'm sure you know where I'm going with this, but I could have seen this. I understand why it's kicking off the preliminary card or the prelims. I also understand if it would have been the main event of the prelims, but I like the fight. You know, it is a rematch. But what's your take on this one?
Tecia Torres says she might retire soon.
Yep.
Well, you know, when you have like 11 fights in her pro career, if you include the exhibition fights, and all of them go to decision, every one of them go to decision, you're going to accumulate enough damage by age 27 to where it makes you think that maybe you should. Like, I mean, her fights do not end. I don't know if that was the trend as an amateur. I'd have to go back and look. But that's rough, especially, you know, you face Rose Namajunas and Angela Hill, and Felice Herrig is, you know, her striking is no joke. She fought Rose Namajunas and Paige Van Zandt earlier in her career. She fought Esparza on Tough. This is a rematch of a Tough fight that Tecia Torres won, but you know, it makes sense when you go back and look at her body of work. Now,
well, I remember, Sean, when she was fighting in Invicta, she was one of my favorite fighters. I'll never forget her. I forgot what bout it was, but moving backwards and countering with a kick to the face. I thought, holy smokes. And that's when I started paying attention. I just saw her doing all kinds of damage. And you're right. I'm looking at her record right now. They go to the decision.
Yeah. And since, let's see. I want to say since Tough, she's barely 500. She's like 4-3 if you include those two fights on Tough. I wonder if Bec Rawlings has made the adjustments here because she's a big strawweight, a huge one. There are tools that she has that she can exploit to win this fight. And we always talk about the one foot out the door deal. If Tecia Torres is already considering retirement, you wonder where her frame of mind is. Although every time we've said that, it seems like that person ends up winning. So what the hell do we know?
As always, you're right. Yeah. The rest of the prelim card, you got Ramos Tanaka, Skelly Grutzenmacher, and you got Mistead versus Blades. Any one of those bouts that stick out to you?
Nope, not at all.
And we move on to the main card. One of our favorites, Angela Hill. She's back finally. She called it the backwards way of getting back into the UFC.
Sure was.
She's taken on Jessica Andrade. Angela Hill, one of the reasons why I am such a huge fan of hers is because it doesn't matter when I do Ryzen or what I do in general. If she's watching, she will let me know and just puts a massive smile on my face. So I love the girl. She's fantastic, but it won't be an easy fight versus Jessica.
That's how the hell you get back to the UFC, doing what she did. She got right back in there, and she beat everybody that Invicta threw at her. 4 fights in Invicta. Now, I think it's more impressive that she actually got 4 fights in Invicta than that she won 4 fights in general, because there are people who can't get 2 fights in Invicta because it seems like they were never run shows, and when they do, you never consistently get good cards. But she earned her way back into the UFC. Kudos to the UFC for waiving that 4-month period after they screwed up with that before. But Jessica Andrade, man, since she came to strawweight in June, she's looked real good. Panay and Calderwood, and then if you add Angela Hill to that resume, that's title shot territory. It's time. You give her the title shot. Angela Hill's not going to be a walk in the park for her, though. Not after the way that she has looked this year. Angela Hill has shown that she can finish in the first round, the second round. She can go the distance. She can overcome adversity. She's got heart and determination. And that's not something we necessarily saw during her UFC run. So Angela Hill is a great case of a young fighter who was very inexperienced, learning and overcoming adversity. Because, she was thrown to the wolves in the UFC, too. Esparza, Torres, and Namajunas.
Yeah.
Now, keep in mind, this is a girl who, when she left the UFC, had a 2-2 record. And those are the people she fought? Well, it ain't getting any worse than that. So, hey, she's seen about as tough as it gets in that division outside of Joanna. So this is a hell of a fight. We've got a feature coming up on Jessica Andrade tomorrow, by the way.
Oh, very cool. FightfulMMA.com, ladies and gentlemen. We move on to the heavyweight division. Anthony Hamilton taking on Marcel Fortuna. And I think Adam Martin said it best on Monday. He's like, I don't care about this fight. I want to see it. I'll break it down later on this week. But we're getting to later on this week. Anthony Hamilton, in my opinion, cannot afford to lose this fight. And Fortuna, from my understanding, hasn't competed in quite some time. But any care for this fight here, or are you bringing out your inner Sean Pearson in a moment?
I'll care about it when it happens because it's a heavyweight fight. I'll care about it for about a minute and a half, and then when it doesn't end in a knockout, I'll be like, okay, I don't care about this. That's pretty much how it'll play out.
Okay.
But Freight Train does have to win. I think Freight Train does have to win.
Yeah.
He's I don't think necessarily to keep his job because he's been one of those win-loss guys. But if he wants to make a run, I think that he better win. He's 36 years old. And, I don't know how many 37-year-old heavyweights after rotating wins and losses are going to be able to make a run. And he's facing a guy who, like you said, hadn't fought in a year and a half. And, hey, got to do it. Got to win the fight.
We move down, but up the card. Down a division, up the card. OSP, Ovince St. Preux, taking on a Volkan Ozdemir. My concern with Volkan, obviously taking this fight basically on 2 weeks' notice, is the importance of needing footwork with his style and taking on a guy like OSP, who obviously is the favorite in this fight, to my understanding. A lot of people don't know much about Volkan. I can attest to you, Volkan's a bad dude, and you can get Kamaru Usman. I'll get Kamaru to back it up, obviously, with training with Volkan. The guy's a bad dude, but he's going to have a hard time with OSP, and if he can't get away from OSP, considering the last week or two have been cutting weight, although he is in shape because he was trained to be in the co-main event for Titan, don't get me wrong, but now that was a heavyweight fight. He's got to cut the weight to 205 to take on OSP. Your take on this bout?
Here's the interesting thing about what you just said. We don't know a lot about Volkan, but what do we really know about Ovince St. Preux? We don't really know anything about Ovince St. Preux. John Jones, who is underrated as one of the great scientists in the game of MMA, he said that OSP was one of his toughest fights because OSP doesn't know what he's going to do next. And when he was studying film, fighters like Daniel Cormier and Anthony Rumble Johnson and Rashad Evans and Quentin Rampage Jackson, they have tendencies and you know what they're going to do. But I didn't know what OSP was going to do, and that's why I couldn't finish him, because OSP doesn't know what his next move is. He might throw a jab and then a shot, but that's something that maybe he's never done before. So, like, the unknown is there, and that could be a really, really good opening for Volkan to get a big win and make an impression in the UFC. It's one win over OSP, probably a top 15 guy immediately, given the state of the division. So, yeah, and I mean, this is another guy who faced quite a big layoff recently in Volkan, because I think he's only fought once over the last 2.5 years. And I remember seeing him in Bellator before that, but this is a big opportunity for Volkan, and this is a fight that OSP has to win if he wants to be taken seriously.
Speaking of has to wins, the lightweight belt between Abe Trujillo and James Vick, I already explained that there's going to be violence in this fight. It's a fight that I think will likely go 15 minutes, and it's going to be hell on both these guys. Then Abe Trujillo does an interview and promises there will be hell to pay in this fight, and promises there's going to be damage and ugliness and and he's going to hurt James Vick. I really like this fight. This is my early fight of the night candidate. This is going to get ugly, but someone cannot afford to lose this fight. Your thoughts?
Yeah, if you want someone to talk politics, James Vick might be your guy. He says some of the most asinine stuff I've ever seen. If Abel Trujillo says that it's not going to go to decision, it might not go to decision. That man, he is something else. That dude. But his last few fights have went to decision. Trujillo's got one loss in his last 7 fights, so he's on quite a roll. I think he keeps it going here against James Vick, and it has nothing to do with Vick's weird political posts. Whether you're a Republican or Democrat, they're just weird. Weird.
You there, Sean? I think you're sort of going on. I think you said weird, which is fine. Co-main event
about Vick's political posts, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, pretty much, yeah.
Fair enough. All right. Co-main event. Alexa Grasso, who's got tons of hype behind her. She did great, or pretty good in her Octagon debut. She's taken on Felice Herrig, someone that I guess has turned into this gatekeeper at 125 pounds. I like this fight here, and Felice can sort of stop that hype train, stop the momentum that Grasso has right now, but I don't think she'll be able to do it, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's a good fight. Herrig's 2-1 in her last 3 fights. Grasso is a girl that they probably want as a big star in the UFC, given her background, her record. She's a Mexican star. She's 23 years old. She's 9-0. She has proven that she can beat some really good fighters in Invicta. So I think it's the right move. I think it's the right fight. And hey, if Felice Herrig wins, I'm sure they're not going to be that upset with that either. Although they haven't, for a while, she was one of those girls that had one foot out the door as well. But I like this fight. It's a good fight. I'm looking forward to it. I think Grasso gets it done, but I don't think that Herrig's going to make it easy on her at all. I think Herrig is a much better fighter than anybody gives her credit for. Because you know how some people are. They're like, a girl looks a certain way. She posts certain sort of pictures to her Instagram, and people assume she can't fight, and the UFC is just pushing her to push her. Well, the UFC doesn't push Felice Herrig. She markets herself. She does a good job at it, and I think she's a pretty good fighter. But I think Alexa Grasso is going to win this fight.
I concur. Great assessment on Felice as well. Main event, though. Bermudez.
Can't wait.
Bermudez. Korean Zombie. He's finally back. He's been gone for 2 to 3 years.
I've missed him so much.
Oh, we all have.
Missed him so much.
But he is going to have some ring rust or cage rust to deal with, despite, and I've said it before, said it too many times, every time I bring it up, Freddie Sensal proving it to us that, nope, there's no such thing as cage rust. Doesn't happen. I did fine against Jay-Z. Some people can argue the other way. Either way, this is going to be a fun fight. Pearson told me Bermudez is going to smash the Korean Zombie. I'm not sure about that.
He could because we don't know. Like, we can't take Korean Zombie's body of work before and apply it to now. That was 2.5 years ago at the earliest. Who knows if he'll ever be the same after the Aldo fight, much less after the Aldo fight and a 2.5 year layoff. So I don't know. I know I'm excited to see him fight again. I know that Bermudez, coming off of 2 straight wins, absolutely better beat a guy who hasn't fought in 2.5 years. If he, like we said before, he wants to stay in the picture. For Korean Zombie, him getting lost, or him losing, or you getting smoked, you can say, well, I haven't fought. Well, 2.5. Sorry, 3.5 years.
Yeah, it's been a while.
3.5 years. And then even before that, how about this? He didn't fight for almost 1.5 years before that. So we're looking at a guy who, over the last 4.5 years, has fought 1 time. That's against Jose Aldo. His shoulder got wrecked, and Jose Aldo is one of those opponents that may change you for life. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like how Conor McGregor says, they're not the same after they fight me. Jose Aldo could be one of those guys too. Again, I'd have to look at his body of work. But I'm just excited to see Korean Zombie back in there. He's 29 years old. He turns 30 next month. But, man, it just brings me joy to watch the man fight.
It brings me joy that you survived this whole podcast, considering your current state of health. And Lord knows I've been there, especially my final week of November till the middle week of January. I had a cold, not cold, not cold, sickness, not sickness. I'm finally healthy now. I've been actually sweating since the beginning of this podcast because I worked out right before we did the podcast, showered, and had a nice bowl of homemade fresh butter chicken and rice, and then a hot coffee, which has got me in a bit of trouble right now. But I feel great. Hope you feel great soon. Anything else you want to talk about or at least promote, Mr. Sean Ross Sapp, before we say goodbye?
Yeah, please follow Fightful Wrestle, Fightful MMA, Fightful Online. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. As always, you can subscribe to us, iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube. Fightful.com has everything. I'm talking pro wrestling, MMA, boxing, latest news, interviews, videos, photo galleries, results, live coverage, discussion, forums. If you register for Fightful.com, you can get early access to shows from Shane Helms. We do an awesome retro topic each week. The Matt Riddle Brocast, which is always an experience. I met him last weekend. And I'll say this, people of San Antonio, wash your fucking hands.
Ladies and gentlemen, Sean Ross Sapp. You can follow him online, social media, at Sean Ross Sapp. I told you before this podcast started, nothing good would come from this podcast. Lo and behold, he potentially waited to the very end to let it happen. Yours truly, at Showdown Joe, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I want to thank everyone for tuning in live and everyone who'll be watching this later on. Until then, or until tomorrow, 1:30 p.m. Eastern, I will have Reed Kuhn discussing a whole variety of topics and a special surprise potentially tomorrow. I may have 2 guests. I'm not sure. But other than that, tomorrow, 1:30 p.m., Reed Kuhn. Thank you, everyone. This has been the Fightful MMA podcast. Have yourselves a